current MP is heretical, uncanonical, and schismatic. Apostolic Canon 30. If any bishop obtain possession of a church by the aid of the temporal powers, let him be deposed and excommunicated, and all who communicate with him as well. The current MP is controlled by the KGB. Former KGB Lieutenant Colonel Konstantin Preobrazhensky stated, absolutely all the bishops and the overwhelming majority of the priests of the MP worked with the KGB. From the Russian Orthodox Autonomous Church. We regard the Moscow Patriarchate since its re-establishment in 1943 under Joseph Stalin, and still to this day, as a schismatic and heretical sect that separated from the Russian Orthodox Church in 1927 under Metropolitan Sergius and continues to remain until now in that evil schism. Sergianism is an ideology that attempts to reconcile the mission of the Church in the world with the mission of secular government. In his 1927 declaration, Metropolitan Sergius stated that the joys and the sorrows of the Soviet Union were the joys and the sorrows of the Church. By this declaration, Metropolitan Sergius, in effect, committed the same betrayal of the faith that those in ancient times committed by offering incense to idols in order to satisfy the demands of the authorities of the day. Since the time of that betrayal, even though the Moscow Patriarchate has become very powerful in the eyes of the world, the basic fact remains that their organization has developed outside of membership in the Church of Christ. Until the recent unification of Rokor with the Moscow Patriarchate, the true Russian Orthodox Church had either fled abroad, forming the Rokor, Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, or had gone into the catacombs. Over 200 of these catacomb communities have joined the Russian Orthodox Autonomous Church. We neither have communion with nor recognize the pseudo-synagogue known as the Moscow Patriarchate, nor any of the so-called churches that are in communion with it or admit that the MP possesses the sacramental grace of the Church. One such group is a Synod headed by Metropolitan Kiprian of Europa and Phili. According to their ecclesiology, the grace of the Church can exist in churches that are schismatic, contrary to the first canon of St. Basil the Great. See also Apostolic Canons 46, 47, and 68. To accept the modern MP is to recognize the validity of papism, monophysitism, and ecumenism. The MP has been part of the Ecumenist World Council of Churches organization since 1960. In 1970, and again in 1993, the MP officially recognized the validity of Roman Catholic sacraments. And in 1990, the MP established communion with the Monophysite heretics. The current MP is in schism. St. John Chrysostom said, exactness in the keeping of times is not as important as the crime of division and schism. The MP is ecumenist and has rightly been anathematized. To be with the MP is to place oneself under this anathema. Patriarch Alexis of Moscow worked for the KGB for over 40 years and was an ecumenist. In 1934, Hieromartyr Cyril, Metropolitan of Kazan, said that those clergy and laymen who receive the sacraments in Sergianist churches, while knowing the unrighteousness of the Sergianist position, receive those sacraments to their condemnation. Apostolic Canons 46, 47, and 68 in the first canon of St. Basil the Great all teach that heretics and schismatics are outside the Church and have no sacraments. The incorrupt St. Metropolitan Philaret of New York wrote of the MP, this false church has been twice anathematized. His Holiness Patriarch Tikhon and the All-Russian Church Council anathematized the communists and all their co-workers. This terrible anathema has not been lifted to this day and preserves its power, since it can be lifted only by an All-Russian Church Council as being the canonically higher church authority. And a terrible thing happened in 1927 when the leader of the church, Metropolitan Sergius, by a shameful apostate declaration submitted the Russian Church to the Bolsheviks and declared that he was cooperating with them. In the most exact sense, the expression of the prayer before confession was fulfilled, fallen under his own anathema. For in 1918, the Church anathematized all the co-workers of communism, and in 1927 she herself entered into the company of these co-workers and began to praise the red God fighting authorities, to praise the red beast of which the Apocalypse speaks. And this is not all. When Metropolitan Sergius published his criminal declaration, the faithful children of the Church immediately separated from the Soviet Church, and the Catacomb Church was created, and she in turn anathematized the official church for her betrayal of Christ. We receive clergymen from Moscow, not as ones possessing grace, but as ones receiving it by the very act of union, but to recognize the church of the evildoers as the bearer and repository of grace, that we, of course, cannot do, for outside of orthodoxy there is no grace, and the Soviet Church has deprived itself of grace. In his encyclical of 1928, Metropolitan Anthony Krapovitsky of Kiev declared in the name of his whole synod that the leaders of the MP were schismatics and apostates. This declaration was quoted by Metropolitan Filaret in his 1969 encyclical on the American Metropolia, and in 1977, the same Metropolitan Filaret told Dr. Vladimir Moss in the presence of witnesses that he should remain faithful to the anathema of the Catacomb Church against the MP. Other members of the Russian Church abroad who held this zealot position were Archbishop Averki of Jordanville, Archbishop Nicodemus of Great Britain, Archbishop Anthony of Los Angeles, Archbishop Andrew of Rockland, Proto-Presbyter Michael Polsky, and Professor Andreev, the last three of whom had all been members of the Catacomb Church. Even Father Seraphim Rose himself once compared the Sergianists and Ecumenists to the iconoclasts who were graceless heretics. In 1965, the Church of Constantinople attempted to lift the 1954 anathema against the Roman Catholics, and the MP did not object, but in 1969 decided to give communion to Catholics in certain circumstances, an act which was defined by the Rocor Synod as heretical. St. John Chrysostom says, "He who communicates with an excommunicate is himself excommunicate." This is also the teaching of Apostolic Canon 10, which states, "If anyone shall pray even in a private house with an excommunicated person, let him also be excommunicated." I. M. Andreev writes, "There is no heresy without heretics in their practical activity." The WCC in its declarations says, "The Church confesses, the Church teaches, the Church does this, the Church does that." In this way, the WCC witnesses that it does not recognize itself to be simply a council of churches, but the one church, and all who are members of the WCC are members of this one false church, this synagogue of Satan. And by this participation in the WCC, all the local Orthodox churches fall under the Rocor anathema of 1983 and fall away from the true church. In their number is the Moscow Patriarchate. St. Justin Popovich called the World Council of Churches a heretical, humanistic, humanized, and man-worshipping club which consists of 263 heresies, every one of which is a spiritual death. And he said that before the joint prayers with pagans, Hindus, Buddhists, and Jews. In his famous speech before the rabbis of New York on November 13, 1991, Patriarch Alexis, alias KGB agent Drozdov, said, "Dear brothers, shalom to you in the name of the God of love and peace. We are all brothers, for we are all children of the Old Testament on Mount Sinai, which, as we Christians believe, was renewed by Christ. Your law is our law, your prophets are our prophets." End quote. Since 2007, there has been increased ecumenical activity in the MP, including an increased representation at the heretical WCC. Let us not forget that the MP signed the heretical Ballermann Agreement in 1994, where it officially recognized Roman Catholics as a sister church. The baptism of penitent papists into the Orthodox Church was prohibited. All rebaptism is prohibited. The Orthodox Church recognizes the Catholic Church in her entirety as a sister church, and indirectly recognizes also the Oriental Catholic Churches, the Uniates. The current Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, is KGB and has a fortune estimated at $4 billion from the tax-free import of alcohol and tobacco. This is not consistent with the monastic way of life. See the information in the description box for more information. Thank you. Patriarch Kirill is KGB. He is also a pro-Roman Catholic ecumenist. At a Christmas party organized by the Central Television of Moscow in 1993, Kirill, who at that time was a metropolitan, was asked by a reporter what he thought of the Last Judgment and the resurrection. he replied that he did not believe in them. St. Justin stated that people who say there is no resurrection of the dead and that their souls, when they die, are taken to heaven are not Christian at all. Father Georges Florovsky said, Christians as Christians are not committed to any philosophical doctrine of immortality, but they are committed to the belief in the general resurrection. The current MP is under at least 6 divinely issued anathemas. The anathema against the heretics of the WCC, the anathema against Bolshevism and those who cooperate with it, the anathema against renovationism, of which Surgeonism is the heir, the anathema of the Catacomb Church against the Surgeonists, the anathema against those who forsake the martyrs of Christ and turn to false martyrs, and the 1983 anathema against ecumenism. St. Theodosius of the Kiev Caves, one of the greatest saints who ever lived, said that by honoring other faiths, we dishonor our own. The 6th session of the 7th Ecumenical Council says, those who, moved by divine zeal, always concur with the Fathers and the traditional ordinances of the Church, flee from all who hold contrary opinions as though from enemies. St. Ignatius said, if thy bishop should teach anything outside of the appointed order, even if he lives in chastity, or if he works signs, or if he prophesy, let him be unto thee as a wolf in sheep's clothing, for he works the destruction of souls. St. Anthony the Great said, be afraid of the apostasy from faith as the beginning of all evil. St. John Maximovich said, there will be a mass falling away from faith. Moreover, many bishops will betray faith, justifying themselves by pointing at the splendid state of the Church. People will be disposed to search for compromise. A forthright confession of faith will disappear. People will excel in justifying their fall, and tender evil will contribute to such general disposition, and people will become accustomed to apostasy and to sweetness of compromise and sin. Saint Joseph of Polotsk himself, in spite of his rank of abbot, was not afraid to expose the Metropolitan of all Russia, who turned out to be a heretic. Because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Revelation 3:16. This lukewarmness is identified by Archbishop Theophanus of Poltava with the religious moral fall of bishops, which is one of the most characteristic signs of the last times. Father Georges Florovsky writes, neither priests nor bishops nor metropolitans will save us, but the mystery of our faith and the keeping of the divine commandments. That is what shall save us, wrote Ivan Vishensky from Mount Athos, and he forthwith defended the right of the faithful Christians to depose and drive out any apostate bishop, lest with that evil eye or pastor they go to Gehenna. He also said, very often the measure of truth is the witness of the minority. It may happen that the Catholic Church will find itself but a little flock. Father Georges also writes, the whole body of the Church has the right of verifying, or to be more exact, the right, and not only the right, but the duty of certifying. It was in this sense that in the well-known encyclical letter of 1848, the Eastern Patriarchs wrote that the people itself, lays, that is the body of the Church, was the guardian of piety. He also writes, therefore in questions of faith the people must judge concerning his teaching. The duty of obedience ceases when the bishop deviates from the Catholic norm, and the people have the right to accuse and even to depose him.